Welcome to the Leadership Lounge. This is the sixth one where we look at leadership topics with leaders that I know, and we explore together those topics. And this week I am joined by Sarah Gillett and Tim and Maz Walker and Abby Steer. Delighted to have you guys with me. Thank you for joining us. So let me introduce each one to you. So let's start with Sarah. Sarah, you are a coach and a former diplomat. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I had a terrific time as a diplomat in 7 different postings, doing lots of wonderful jobs. I loved it all, and then there was a point where I realised that I wanted to come back to the UK, and I had to work out what I wanted to do in the UK. So I decided to become a coach, and was lucky enough to choose a training programme that had Colin on it. And earlier this summer, I completed the qualification and accreditation, and I'm now embarking on this fabulous world of coaching.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And it's been an absolute delight to get to know you, Sarah. And thank you for joining us today on the Leadership Lounge, which is brilliant. And then we have Tim and Maz Walker. Tim and Maz are good friends of mine, and we met initially through working together, supporting the work of the Emerging Leaders charity. And you have a fantastic phrase that you stand for, which is about going the extra mile. So welcome to the Leadership Lounge, and tell us a little bit more about yourselves.
Oh, thank you. Well, our surname is Walker, so it sort of ties in with what Jesus said about going the extra mile, was to not just conform to the standards that are set, but actually to then push those boundaries even further. So in situations we found ourselves in, be they big things or small things, it's okay, well, what can I do to the best of my ability? What can I do to help? Jesus said that you need to turn the other cheek. He said that you need to give, if you've got one cloak, give another, give another. Don't just accept the normal standards. So we try to apply that to every area of our lives. And so going the extra mile walkers, all sort of ties in.
Fantastic. Yeah. And as we explore the topic today, we'll kind of hear a bit more of your story and how you put that into practice in going the extra mile for others. So brilliant. Thank you for joining us. And thirdly, we have Abby. Abby Steer is the founder of the Steer School of Dance. So welcome, Abby. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm 25 years old, and about 3 years ago, my father passed away. And ever since then, I've kind of had my mission is to kind of do him proud. And in that, I've set up my own dance school. And since then, I've managed to gain my own premises. And I'm just about to announce as well that I'm actually having a second studio as well. So it's kind of all about how I've kind of done this whole business and school in kind of honour of my dad. Yeah,
it's fantastic. And again, we'll discover more about that as we look at the topic, and a tremendous testimony, not only to your dad, who was a wonderful man, and I know he'll be incredibly proud of what you've achieved, but also tremendous testimony to you and all that you've put into this. And we'll discover more of that as we look at the topic today. So thank you for joining us on the Leadership Lounge. So there are our guests. And so it's looking at what's our topic today. So our topic this month is looking at bold steps. As leaders, we need to make sometimes bold steps. And leadership isn't easy. It can be really challenging and involves bold steps, either for us or for our organisation. And there's a guy called Seth Godin. I love his book called Tribes. And in it, he says, the secret of leadership is simple. Do what you believe in, paint a picture of the future, go there, and people will follow. And he was right. But what is really understated here is the key aspect of courage as part of that. And leaders need to take bold steps and to dig deep into courage. And sometimes they're baby bold steps and elements of courage to stretch their own comfort zone. And sometimes they're bold steps for the organisation. And Brené Brown, in her book, Dare to Lead, talks about courage and makes a strong link with this thing called vulnerability and being vulnerable. And courage is not about the macho, but it's having the courage to turn up even when you can't control the outcome. So I was really intrigued as to what helps leaders to take bold steps, what facilitates boldness. So I've gathered people today that I think have taken bold steps, and I want us to unpick together what it is that facilitates us as bold leaders. So bold steps it is. Let me start with Abby. Abby, when we last met, you were still at school. I think it was 13 years ago. I'm so proud as a former head teacher of yours, what you've achieved. Now you're the founder of the Steer School of Dance. So, I mean, you mentioned in the intro about your driver for that, but just tell us a little bit more about how that came about.
So I started teaching when I was around 13, and once I'd left school, I decided that I'd kind of get my teaching qualification so that I could kind of make a career out of it, because I always knew it's kind of that this is what I'm meant to do. And once I kind of got qualified, I started teaching all around Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, and I was teaching pretty much 7 days a week. I was exhausted, but I kind of knew that was like kind of how my life was going to be. But my dad had always said, why don't you just do your own school? Like, stop working for other people and try and do it for yourself, because then I have more control and just a bit more of stability for the future. Yeah. And I literally was on holiday one day, and he passed away the year before, and I was on holiday with all my family, and I was just like, I'm just going to do it. So I literally messaged a school that I taught at and was like, I'm not teaching for you anymore. I'm really sorry. I'm going to do my own thing. And then I started, and I had 20 kids in my class, which I never thought I'd have for a first day. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I've got quite a few kids. And it kind of was just, as soon as that happened, I kind of knew that this is going to be something special. And then gradually over the year, I had to give up more and more of my other teaching jobs, because obviously there was more demand for classes. And then, so then a year later, I was able to open my own premises. So now I've got my own studio, and it's kind of, everything's just expanding every kind of year. So now I'm expanding into a second studio as well. So it's all just a bit. Yeah,
it's just amazing. Your story is amazing. And when I was first reading it, it was just so exciting to hear what you've achieved. So, I talked just now in the intro about bold steps. Do you see it as a bold step? I mean.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely a big thing, because I've never kind of had any, I've always had responsibilities, because obviously I was always been in charge of a class. But for me to go from just turning up to a class and teaching kind of what I know, and from then to go to a setting where I'm in charge, I've got to get all the insurance, all the admin, like I've got to do everything. And I'd kind of put myself out there, because I didn't really have a clue what I was doing, not gonna lie. But it kind of was nice, because I was in charge. I could set the limits as to what I wanted to do. I had made all my own systems, so that eventually everything just kind of, it just now runs like clockwork, and it's so much easier. And it was a massive step for me, because I didn't really know what I was doing, but it worked out in the end.
Yeah, it certainly has, isn't it? And so you did see it as a bold step, but so what were the vulnerabilities? I mean, you've talked about some fairly significant things like the admin and the sense of being in charge. Did that feel vulnerable, or were there other vulnerabilities for you?
The vulnerability I'd say most was probably failing, because I just didn't want to fail and put myself out there and it kind of all come back in my face. And then obviously the loss of kind of income, because obviously now I had outgoings as well as incoming. So I think in terms of vulnerability, like everything that I'd kind of done was just, I'd kind of had to be stripped back as to what I was doing, because it was all kind of just so new and different. And it was just made me very vulnerable.
Yeah. So I mean, what Brené Brown talks about there, that actually to be courageous, you have to be vulnerable. You certainly experienced that, but you took the bold steps nevertheless, which is fantastic. So what made you take the bold step?
I think it was all just driven from my dad. Like, he'd always said that this is what I needed to do. So I was kind of like, my dad was so sensible and like so smart. And I knew that if he was thinking that this is what I should be doing, that it's going to have to work, because he wouldn't have wanted me to have tried it otherwise. Yeah. And then as soon as I kind of put like a feeler out there on social media, as in like, I might do this. What do people think? And the reaction was just incredible. And I was like, well, this is just going to get bigger and bigger and better. So it kind of was just trying to see, I don't know, it's all just from my dad, just imagining what he'd think about this whole thing, and kind of getting my brain to think like his, because I'm not very logical when it comes to like business type minds. And so I'm trying to really rein in to how he would approach situations.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I'm going to just kind of talk some summaries in a short while, but what I'm picking out from your answer there was what drove you to still take that bold step despite the vulnerabilities was the example of your dad. So a real sense of a mentor, someone that gave you some clarity. And then you've also talked about the people around you. So your connections around social media, you tested that out with them. And that encouragement from your supporters also gave you that courage to take that first big, bold step. Yeah,
definitely.
Thank you. Just such a powerful story, Abby. So thank you for sharing that with us. Sarah, you're also here because you've taken a bold step. You're a coach, but you did work for the civil service in the diplomatic service. So what drove you to make that change? Obviously, Official Secrets Act's providing, the things you're allowed to tell us. What gave you the courage to take that step?
Strangely enough, I didn't think of it as being a step which involved a lot of courage to begin with. I'd had a great series of jobs and challenges and experiences with the Foreign Office. But there was something in me which told me that I wanted to come back to the UK. And actually, my last few jobs in the Foreign Office, I'd been working with coaches, and they had really transformed the way I could do my job. So I wanted to give back. I wanted to actually learn this art of helping others to solve problems and learn more about themselves and face challenges. So it was something which I thought about a lot, and it drove me in my last few experiences as a diplomat. And at the time, it didn't seem like a very bold step at all. It seemed like a very natural step.
Yeah.
And then I think a bit of reality dawned because rather like Abby, I've been working for an organization. So if I couldn't fix my IT, there was somebody to do that. And I was always following, a schedule and a sort of set of things to do. And suddenly I was completely in charge of everything. And that felt like a sort of vulnerable place. But I'm learning to actually like having to start from scratch again.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. You talking there was almost this experience that you had, e.g. coaches that you'd worked with, created for you this almost seminal moment in terms of I'm connecting with this and I want to give back. And there was then something in you that was almost like calling you to this kind of next step to the point where it didn't feel like a bold step for you, this sense that really driving you. So then you talked later on about these vulnerabilities, such as, well, I'd then need to get somebody to fix my IT, this sense of being more alone. Was that the kind of only vulnerability, or were there other vulnerabilities for you?
Well, I wondered if I could do it. You're a teacher, Colin, so you have that sort of art of helping others to learn, whereas I'd always been at the recipient end of learning. I've mentored a lot of people in the teams that I've led, but actually wondering whether you can learn a completely new profession at my stage after being a diplomat all my life. I think that was quite a vulnerability as well. But it didn't last long, that bit. I suddenly realized that actually I enjoyed it so much that I was determined to do it.
Right. So there's this sense that actually as you started to take the baby steps of boldness, it almost answered the question for you of actually I can do this, I can make this career change. And you were, I guess, emotionally intelligent enough to be picking up the signs that actually, yes, this is a good step for me to take, which is brilliant. So that helped you take the bold step. Was there anything else that makes the difference to help you take bold steps?
Well, I think two things, sort of internally, being sure that it's what you want to do, and then testing it out in conversations with yourself. And then secondly, the way we learned how to coach, there was a lot of practice involved, and the reward from actually doing it and establishing that, yes, this is what I want to do. So I think that if I think about boldness, you have to be bold with yourself, but you also have to be bold in your outward actions and activities, and then you get a bit of a reward loop going.
Yeah. So with that same sort of thing, that reward loop that just helps you go, actually, this is working, and it just leads that. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. So Tim and Maz, for you guys, Tim, you talked earlier about this mantra of kind of go the extra mile, and you've talked about kind of where that comes from in terms of the faith element for you. But for some people, they might believe that, but actually taking the step of doing that is quite significant. So where does it come from, where you took that mantra and put it into action, rather than for many people who would read that piece of writing and say, yeah, that's great. Yeah, we all ought to go the extra mile, and yet they don't. So where does that come from? The making that step of actually going the extra mile for you guys?
I don't know. I think it comes from the fact that, we're all interconnected. Humanity is interconnected, and we saw a massive issue in 2005 in South Africa when we visited a charity just outside Cape Town where there was an issue with HIV/AIDS. And it's okay to go and see, or even on the news to hear about issues and situations. I mean, it doesn't have to be far away in Africa. It can be on your doorstep. But and it's that, for me, it was just like, or for us, it was like, okay, but we know about it now, and we've seen it, and we've experienced it, but who's going to actually go and do something about this issue? And it's okay to send £10 a month to a charity and hope that that money eventually gets to somebody on the ground, which I don't think many of it does. But anyway, that's another topic. But actually, if that situation is going on, and I've read those words of this great teacher, you have to believe he was a son of God, but he was a great moral teacher. And in the Beatitudes, he encouraged us to take on things that to kick against the norms of the world. And so with boldness, we went, okay, well, crumbs, this situation isn't going to sort itself out on its own. So maybe with the education that we've got, we're educated in the UK, okay, just a simple comprehensive education, but I mean, so much more educated than the majority of the people in the world, and also those that we were thinking of helping. And I think your skills as a leader, through business and through being parents, puts you in a position where you think, okay, well, if I applied that to another situation, could I actually be that difference? Could I actually step into the breach for someone else? And what would I want if I was in that situation, or my family was in that situation, and someone else knew about it? Or are they just going to walk away from me and leave me there? And so that heart compassion that's within me was just like, I can't just let this go. I've got to go and do something about it. And so to give up our jobs in 2008 to go and start that project was massively challenging, and nothing all I wanted to be doing by the time I was 50. I'm 53, by the way, Abby. I know you're 25. All I wanted to be doing when I was 50 was retired and playing golf. I'm not retired, and I haven't hit a golf ball in years. But it was that, okay, what can I do? And so that's what propelled us to go and. Yeah. So it wasn't something we wanted to do. I mean, we've got 4 grandchildren, we've got 3 boys. We hardly see any of them because of what we're doing. But it's actually, but there's someone out there that needs my help. So
there's this real sense that you're kind of, for you, your faith and your moral beliefs in that go the extra mile, then met with this, what the Africans call Ubuntu, I'm human because of the other, this sense of, that's what makes the difference as humans. When we see those in need, actually, it's about connecting and caring and supporting. If we if we're well off and yet they're not, this sits in discontent for me. So there was that blend that's what it was pulling to you, this sense of moral human obligation linked to your personal beliefs called you to that, often to the expense of other things, e.g. Time with family and time on the golf course. So that's a huge difference. So Maz, Tim's just mentioned a couple of the bold steps that you've taken. Were there any vulnerabilities for you? You know, we've heard from Sarah and from Abby around they would agree with Brené Brown. There is an element of vulnerability, but were there any for you in some of these bold steps that you then took?
Absolutely. I mean, that feeling of being, what on earth am I doing? feel totally unequipped to be setting up a project in South Africa. I'm not medically trained, and yet I put ourselves in this position to support families that were struggling with HIV and TB. I'm not a social worker, so what on earth was I thinking? You know, every day in those very first months when we went out to South Africa, moved out there, it was just like, I just got to get through today. There's again, our faith comes into this. There's a verse in the Bible that just says, you know, just give me enough strength for today. As long as I've got enough strength for today, you know, and as we were setting up the unit and preparing, people would say, so, because we had volunteers come and help us with that setup, and also once the children's unit was open, you know, so what are we going to do about this? And it's just like, well, I don't actually know. Let me think about it. Let's talk about it. Let's explore, because, you know, I didn't have a whole backlog of history other than just being a mum. And I think that was the biggest heart pull for me was, you know, there were these children that were struggling in families, and it wasn't just the children, actually, it was about the children's mums, because, you know, I felt like a mum to the mothers of the children as well, because, you know, they were all in these awful situations, and you just, you know, my heart just broke for them. And I think it was just that deep empathy. But it did, you know, the bold step bit. So Tim and I are terrible because we could just talk forever. So you will have to shut us up. But, you know, those big steps of actually, I'd lived in the same village all of my life until I was 46, I think I was, when we moved out to South Africa. You know, my family had always lived in that same village. Tim had just lived in the local town nearby. To suddenly completely change the whole direction of our life and move to the other side of the world was crazy, you know. And I think our family and our parents did think we had absolutely lost our our marbles, because it was just an outrageous thing to do. But it was just, there wasn't any way that we couldn't do it. And I do remember walking home from work. I worked in a school. I worked with children with special educational needs, and I coming home, and it's just like, my life is amazing. I have a fabulous family, and which we're all growing up. You know, I live in this amazing village. I've got everything really at my fingertips that I could possibly want. You know, we're not wealthy, but I've got all these riches, and yet it was just this deep ache within me that just kept saying, but there's got to be more to life than this. It can't just be about me in my little bubble. But you know, that was a killer to actually leave two of our sons. Our youngest son came with us, but to leave two of our sons in the UK when we moved out eventually, it was just like, oh man, this isn't easy. This isn't easy.
So I mean, you're talking there about, and I find it fascinating to hear your story again. When I remember first meeting you and just coming away like, oh my word, I am just tiny in comparison to kind of what steps you guys are taking. But yet you're describing underneath this sense of vulnerability and feeling the only thing you took with you into that for you, Maz, was this sense of being mum, but also this aching for what you're seeing. So this inner yearning is what drove you to take those steps. But interesting, as I first heard your story, I thought, oh my goodness, I can never match the awesomeness of these guys' commitment to humanity. But yet, underneath, unbeknown to me, you were also wrestling with this vulnerability of part of that, and yet you still took that step, which is just fantastic. So thank you, all of you guys, for just sharing part of your story about the boldness of steps. I did a bit of research on bold steps for this, just to see, so what is it that helps this? And I'm just going to kind of talk through 4 key components that I discovered in the research. And it's interesting hearing your stories. I think a number of it fits this. So the 4 key components are, first of all, kind of personal, people around you. So this sense of, as a person, you know yourself, and you kind of love the elements of who you have, an experimental mindset, and this sense of wanting to have no regrets. It's interesting for Tim and Maz, just kind of, we've only got one life. What am I going to do with this? Then there's this sense of purpose, knowing your passion, knowing your purpose, but also listening to the excitement, that inner voice that's calling you to that next step. And it's interesting hearing all 3 stories there. It has the same resonance. Then it's people around you. So a hero who perhaps inspires you, but also helpers who surround you with that. Really interesting hearing perhaps like Abby's stories, the sense of your dad being that hero that drove you, but others around you that supported you as part of that. Then the 4th one is around the kind of power and the oomph to do it. So sometimes it's about sharing that passion or writing it down. Actually telling others about it almost puts it out. It makes it real. But also this reason for it. So this sense of, if not now, when? If not me, who? So very much like with Tim and Maz, your story there, this sense of seeing this need. And if we don't respond to this, who is going to? But let's work our way through some of these. So Tim and Maz, this first one of person, knowing yourself, experimental mindset, and having no regrets. How much of that drives you to make bold steps? Does it drive you, knowing yourself, having an experimental mindset, and having no regrets?
I think having an experimental mindset is definitely, for me, I couldn't just accept that this is my lot and that's all that it's ever going to be. When you're at school, it was like going to see the careers officer. What do you want to be? It's just like, I don't know. I don't know what jobs are out there. So, just getting your first job and then working your way up through the ranks and not accepting that my dad worked 40 years it's the same factory working nights, and he went to the same machine every night. And I was thinking, flipping heck, did he not think that there was something more out there than that one machine? And so for me, it was just like, okay, well, experimental. We've got to experiment with life. Yes, there is a status quo. There is a, you live, you go to school, you get a job, you get married, you blah, blah, blah. But actually, where does that, and for some people, that's all that they're really happy with that. But I just couldn't really comprehend the 9 to 5. It just didn't make any sense to me. I was trying to explore having this mindset that's okay. Then there's more out there, and what if it doesn't work? Well, that's an experiment, and we've proved it doesn't work. So, but if it does, wow, wouldn't that be amazing if we just, Edison? I don't know how many 1,000 million times he was supposed to have tried to reinvent a light bulb, but I mean, had he given up on the first experiment, and we wouldn't have lights. Or maybe we would, because someone else would come along. But it was his calling to just pursue, and to some people that's cool, and that's what they are happy with. But I just couldn't satisfy my inner. There must be more.
Yeah. So for you, it very much was experimental. For Abby, Sarah, was there any experimental mindset for any of you? Or is it just the Walkers who've got an experimental mindset that took them all the way to Africa?
Well, I think, what I loved about diplomacy was you never knew what was going to happen next from day to day. So the world is such a fabulous place. And so if experimental mindset is about understanding the complexity of the world and trying new things in it, I think that's part of the excitement of our human existence, and and I love that. It's still a big driver for me.
Yeah, I mean, Abby, it strikes me that you experimented. You do you see it as that, or is it only now we've talked about experimental mindset you're going, oh yeah, maybe I do?
I think it's a bit of both. I think I'm always one of these people that I feel like if you don't try, you're never going to know. So I think you've always got to kind of put yourself out there. And most of the time, I think if you work hard enough, it's going to work. But obviously sometimes you don't. I didn't realize that it would be experimental mindset until obviously we've kind of had this discussion now anyway. So
you just did it, and it turned out that that's what you had. Oh my goodness, I had.
Yes.
Brilliant.
And I think some of that is just retrospective as well, because it's only as I'm looking back that I just think, wow, okay, that was the experimental mindset, or that was knowing myself. I don't think I knew those things at the time. I think at the time it was just like, okay, this is what we're doing now, and this is what we're doing now, and this is what we're doing now, and so I didn't. Yeah, it's far more that as I look back, I just think, as I look back on my life, I just think, wow, that was amazing. But I'm just ordinary me doing what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis.
And maybe that's one of the keys for our listeners, just because sometimes we can big up this thing about taking big, bold steps, but maybe it is just about just being you and taking the little steps of opportunity that come your way, and just resting a little with the vulnerability and just taking those little steps and testing them out and like Tim was saying just now, well, if it doesn't work out, we've worked out one way, it doesn't work. And
I think one of the other things, sorry, jumping in again, it's just like, I do remember whilst we were living and working in South Africa, it was just like, I would think about all these amazing people from history, Wilberforce and, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to think of anybody now, but those people that did amazing things that were incredible and that changed history and all of those kind of things. But I used to just spend time thinking, but they're just ordinary people. They're just somebody's son. They're just not just, but yes, they are just somebody who's going through the motions of whatever it is, and therefore, what does make somebody awesome isn't the big outrageous things, because everybody is awesome. It's just that we don't recognize it in what we think is our ordinary everyday stuff. But you are incredible. Each individual is an incredible individual, and has massive potential to have massive influence wherever they are in whatever they're doing.
And it's just about taking those little experimental steps on the day-to-day things that you're faced with, and sometimes those might turn out to be some quite significant moments when you turn and look back and see what's happened. Fantastic. Sarah, the second one around purpose, now you're like me, in some ways we're in early stages of our coaching career, but as a coach, how can we find our passionate purpose or help others to find their passionate purpose? You got any thoughts on that one?
Well, I think it's the joy of coaching, actually, is that our purpose is to help others discover more about themselves and their potential and how to find a solution in their next steps. So that I think is very strong with me, that I was helped in that way. And my purpose now is to help others find their mojo in the same way. That's a huge driver.
So it's interesting just hearing the stories. So for Tim and Maz, there was this deep kind of sense of we've seen this and we have to respond to it. And it was almost like this excitement that was coming up from within them, like a well. For Abby, it was this sense of, what her dad advised her, but this sense that actually I'm good at dance, and this sense that came up from her that, yeah, I think I need to start this dance school. So there's this sense of excitement that wells up in people. Is it that obvious, do you think? Or if not, how can people find the excitement? What sort of questions as a coach, for example, might we ask them to help them find it? If it's not as obvious as it is for Tim and Maz and Abby, where it just kind of, they couldn't not see it, is there anything we can do to, any kind of questions that help discover that?
Well, for me, that's the most exciting part of coaching, when through a process, which is a very flexible process, you're working with somebody and you take them through a conversation, and then suddenly something lights up for them. And so I think that the whole art of coaching for me is to try and work out what is going to be the path to that light bulb moment. And it comes, it really does come. So I think, Maz mentioned it. We are all extraordinary as human beings, and we walk around and look at each other, and we don't necessarily see that extraordinariness in the first instance. But part of the excitement of being in the world and working with others is when you suddenly discover it. And I think helping others to discover how they can be extraordinary in their own world is a fantastic privilege.
Yeah. So I guess if we want to coach someone through to help that, it's about asking them a series of questions that it helps them discover what they're good at, what they love doing, what brings a smile to their face. And that is possibly where this sense of excitement can start with. And then potentially it's a bit like Tim and Maz, what need do I see that needs meeting? For Abby, it was I could start a dance school which actually could meet the dance needs and the ethos that I want to bring to my local community. So it's how does what I'm good at and love doing then meet needs of those that I see? So that's brilliant. Abby, should we just explore this third one around people? Now, we've heard some of your story already, the people around you and the hero that helped you to make that bold step of establishing the dance school. So is that the case? Did people help you, and who in particular? So in one sense, you get the opportunity to mention a few names, but then of course, well, she didn't mention me. but who was it then? Were there any significant people that helped you?
I had such an amazing little hub of people. So like my family, just to begin with, they're just the most supportive people ever. And it would even be like, even now, I email them at like midnight going, I'm just about to send this out. Does this sound right? I want to make sure it sounds nice. And they always are like, right, let's do this. And they always have their helping hand to make sure that I'm doing things right. And they've always got an opinion and advice on to make sure that I'm kind of going down the right route. But I've also got such an amazing little group of, so some of my dance mums, so obviously I teach their kids, but they just want this school to do well, and even down to one of them is literally like my PA. I'll call her at whatever time and she's like, right, I'll do it, don't worry Abby, it's all sorted. And there's other ones that there's even people like, I'll be like, oh, we're gonna do a fundraiser, and they're like, right, well, we'll offer this, we'll offer that, and they always just seem to have something to give me to help. And I think the more you can surround yourself with people that are willing to do anything for you and they want you to do well, I think that's kind of what I've got around me. And also people that if I've got a bad idea, they're not afraid to tell me, because I think sometimes the bad ideas, people are like, oh yeah, just do it, because they don't want to say it. But sometimes a bit of truth can kind of bring you back down and go, all right, let's reassess.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's this sense of gathering people around you who are for you and want the best for you and what your vision, passion is for, but also this sense of people who will give you the honest truth will help you
Yeah.
refine things so that it does work. So that's fantastic, and so lovely to hear that you've had that around you to help make the dance school such a success. Brilliant. So, and then our last one was this power or the driver for that decision making, and I was quite intrigued by the sharing the item or writing it down. This sense of almost putting it on a metaphorical fridge. You know, when you put the picture of your holiday on the fridge, this is where we're aiming for, or an actual fridge, maybe. Who knows? But Tim, Maz, was there any sense for you where you spoke this dream out to others, or you wrote it down somewhere? Did that help drive that forward?
Yeah, no, definitely. To set up the project, we were partnering with an organisation in South Africa anyway. So it was all very well and good us having this amazing idea that we thought was an amazing idea of setting up this children's home, but was it in line with where their vision was going? Because we didn't want to be flying solo. We wanted to be part of another organisation, and just fleshing out those ideas between ourselves. What were we really talking about? What was it? What was this idea? We say let's do a children's home, but what does that really look like? Let's get some nitty gritty clear in our minds so that we are both heading on the same in the same direction. And then I think more so sharing with family initially was, oh my goodness, these guys have lost their marbles. I've said it before.
Because I think the thing was that we'd had the epiphany of, okay, we need to go and do this, and then we'd had the conversation with the charity in South Africa, and then it was like, okay, well, that's great, but the property is like 2 million rand, which is like £200,000. We haven't got that as a charity. Can you raise those funds to go and it's just like, okay, well, and so I remember going to Maz's school, getting a fax through from the estate agent in South Africa for this piece of land, and signing my name saying I will pay £200,000 in 6 months' time, when we had 2 million nothings. We didn't have anything. We knew we weren't going to put our money towards it, but we knew we had the opportunity of fundraising. But then, to gather people around us to say, this is what we've done. Okay, can you stand with us in this? And there were sleepless nights where the money wasn't in, and with 7 days to go, we still needed £150,000, and that's another story for another podcast. But we had people who knew what the crazy idea was, and
I guess they believed in us.
Yeah, yes, and I think that's why the money did eventually come in, because they could see that we were committed to it, and that's why we raised 200,000 in 6 months.
So there's this sense of actually by speaking it out, by writing it down, not only does it kind of gird you to take that step, but actually it draws together those like-minded people who will share that passion with you. Which again,
and it almost commits you to what you say you're going to do. You're going to do, because you can always have these great ideas in your mind, but actually once you've shared it or put it out there, social media or whatever, then you are committed to it. And I think that's where
we must become accountable, I suppose.
Yeah, and that was great to have friends around us. Like we've had this great idea, and then 6 months later they hear nothing about it. No, actually, we've told you, and we're moving forward, and so we were accountable to, and we gathered people around us to support us. Like board of trustees and whatever that actually were behind the vision as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So that's fantastic. And what always happens in the Leadership Lounge is time flies when we're having fun. And so our time is drawing to a close. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is to share your top tip for our listeners. So in terms of making bold steps, what would your top tip be? And of course, what happens in a minute is I choose one of you, and the others of you go, great. It means I've got a few more minutes to think of my top tip. And I have a bit of a top tip for you as well, so I'll share that one as part of it. So let's start with Sarah. do you have a top tip for our listeners? And for those who are watching this on the video, Tim has now clapped his hands because he knows he's got a few minutes to think of his top tip. So Sarah, do you have a top tip for those making bold steps?
Well, what I've done with myself is always ask myself, how would I feel if I didn't try?
Brilliant. Yeah. So the sense of almost holding yourself to account, almost looking back. At this point, look back. How would you feel? Fantastic.
Good, yeah.
Abby, how about you? Do you have a top tip for bold steps?
I think it'll be just to do it, because if you don't do it, you'll never know. And I think the sooner you can kind of get it over and done with, and it's never as scary once you've done it. Like, you've done the hardest bit and taken a step, the rest will come.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Such, again, clear and simple advice for our listeners. Tim and Maz, you can have one or you can have one each. What would your succinct top tip be?
Ooh, succinct. I think following on really from what Abby said, just take a step. But also maybe just listing out some of those steps, because I'm a massive procrastinator. And so for me to actually do anything, if I list out just the simplest little thing, just to start me on that journey, once I get a bit of momentum, then I'm on my way. But, listing out a few steps, taking those first ones, and then allowing that to carry you forward, because the momentum will then take you on to where you want to head, where you want to go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Tim, do you have a top tip, or are you going to share Maz's?
No, I think, doors open, push those doors, and if they don't open, don't go through them. Have that sort of inner knowing that what you're doing is right. And if you don't feel good about it, then perhaps there's something that's holding you back from doing that. So, we can be bold in things and get it completely wrong. So it's almost having like a peace about that decision you've made. And if you don't feel at peace with it, well, maybe that's a step you need to take to get to that place. Maybe you're in your comfort zone and you don't want to break out of it. But actually, and bold steps aren't big steps. They're just really little steps that all come together that eventually look bold. It's like if you were colouring in, I was just thinking, colouring in around a circle with a pencil, it starts off really, really HB1 or whatever it might be, really fine, and then all of a sudden you go around and around again, and it just gets bolder and bolder and bolder. So you build up that character of boldness and courage as well. So start with a little thing and then just build upon it, and that becomes bold.
Yeah, brilliant. And that links very closely to the one that I was going to do. So I was going to link back to something that Brené Brown had said, that courage is basically, it's a habit. That you get courageous by taking those little steps. You learn to swim by swimming, and you learn to have courage by couraging. So that it links to what you've just said. Take those little steps. Keep practicing a little bit of boldness, a little bit of boldness, a little bit of boldness, and it then becomes something that becomes something more manageable. And links to what some of you guys already said, that you do a little bit and you look back and you think, oh my goodness, yes, that was quite a step. But by taking those little steps, and building up this habit of courage and boldness, then that allows you to do that. So fantastic. It's been an absolute joy again to spend time with you. I mean, I could continue the conversation. We could go on for hours for this podcast, but we must draw it to a close so that for our listeners, there's a nice 45 minutes or so podcast. So thank you again for joining me, to Sarah, to Abby, to Tim and to Maz. Thank you for being part of the Leadership Lounge today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners. And we look forward to you joining us again next month as part of the Leadership Lounge.